Hello and welcome to the season finale of our Mr. Robot recap series on Gold Derby. I'm Daniel Montgomery. I'm here with David Buchanan, Riley Chow, and Tony Ruiz. We are here to discuss the final episode of the second season of Mr. Robot, titled Python Part 2. Get into the details of the episode itself. First, I feel like we should give a congratulations to Rami Malek, who won Best Lead Actor in a Drama Series at the Emmy Awards this past Sunday night. So what did you guys think of that win? I was predicting Spacey, but I was much happier that Rami Malek won that.
Somebody else go first because I'm just going to gush.
Well, it's great that a USA show in its first season can win an Emmy for an unknown actor in this new system. So I think this new system is definitely an improvement over last year, and it made a lot of cool wins like that and Tatiana Maslany. So basically, you don't need to be broadly seen anymore. You just need a pocket of passionate support, which I think is a better situation.
Yeah, I was thrilled for him. I had predicted him over Spacey just because I just didn't feel like Spacey, if he hadn't done it before, and I know the arguments we were giving, but I just didn't feel it for House of Cards this year or for Robin Wright, though I did not predict Tatiana Maslany. But I thought Rami Malek would win, but just his genuine reaction to winning, and it was just a wonderful moment. Everything about it was just great. He gave a great speech, so I'm thrilled for him.
Yeah, he certainly had the best opening line of a speech all night, basically channeling his character. And the fact that it went over so well, audience-wise, Daniel, you were actually there. So, what was it like? How did that line go over actually in the audience?
Well, it's a big room. It's hard to gauge the whole room, but it felt like it felt like an in-joke that everyone in the room was in on, and everyone in the room got that whole, tell me you're all seeing this right now too. That just almost like even the last week of the show, channeling Elliot's mind state, and it was such a good line, and it felt like it could have. That's the sort of thing he could have planned ahead of time, but it didn't feel like it. It felt very spontaneous and sincere and warm and funny and perfect. I thought it was terrific.
Yeah. I was actually shocked. I was totally prepared for him not to win, for all the reasons that we talked about, endlessly. And when he won, it was like, wow. I mean, those were two categories where Best Actor and Best Actress, where I kind of thought we were going to go the House of Cards direction, but I couldn't have been more thrilled with the outcome, even as somebody who doesn't watch Orphan Black. So
I think the telecast producers were a little bit nervous that Rami Malek would win because they put drama actor before drama actress, even though they switched up the order of some other categories, whereas I thought, like, with drama actress, whether Viola Davis or Robin Wright wins, we'll get a big star giving, like, the last celebrity speech of the night. So
it was Tatiana Maslany.
or Tatiana,
or Tatiana Maslany. Thank you, Kiefer Sutherland, for providing us with our Adele Dazeem moment of the Emmys.
He was a fellow Canadian too. He couldn't even.
Well, and it was his voice. It was his voice. When they were showing just the images and reading the nominees, it was his voice. So he had said it correctly before. But I mean, that just drives me crazy. It's like, you're in the industry. You're in the Emmy, galaxy. You should know this. It just makes me crazy.
And a two-time winner in that.
Yeah, learn to pronounce the names, or don't present.
Well, I'll give him this much credit. There have been times when I spend so much time practicing a name to get it right, and then the time comes when you actually have to say it and it counts, and just like a switch flips and you just go the wrong way for some reason, just out of completely at random. So I'll give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt there, and I don't think Tatiana Maslany cares too much since it ended with her accepting an Emmy. So.
Yes.
So, segueing back into this season finale episode of Mr. Robot, and going back to Rami Malek and Elliot, the big development at the end of the part 1 of Python last week was the return of Tyrell Wellick. Well, the return, because at that point, even Elliot wasn't sure, is this a real guy or is this another figment of my imagination? And by the end of this episode, I still think we're only about 90 to 95% sure, maybe not even that much, that it was really Tyrell and not a figment of his imagination, as much as you can know anything on this show. But we got more details in the big, stage 2, which felt fairly simple, after all the build-up. It's like, oh, that building, we're gonna blow it up, which actually was actually a nice kind of there was foreshadowing earlier in the season, the dream Elliot was having with his he was having the dinner with everyone and the building goes down in the background, including Tyrell and all of his friends and family. So clearly some part of his psyche was clued into that, even if it didn't know what it knew. What did you guys think of stage 2, what it is, and how it was revealed?
Well, stage 2 is fine, but the reveal of Tyrell, I mean, it's not even a spoiler where he was all season. If somebody finishes season 1, they go, where's Tyrell? Like, when am I going to see him next? You can say, oh, he shows up in episode 11 after hiding all season. And like, there's nothing that was actually revealed there. So I thought that was a little bit of a letdown.
Yeah, I can't say that it wasn't the payoff that I wanted either. Even though I thought that, at various points throughout the episode, I thought that Martin Wallstrom was spectacular, with that kind of combination of desperation and strange attachment disorder and creepiness, while still having that malevolence about him. But I can't say that, him just being, basically with the Dark Army planning this whole thing and putting it into motion, I can't say that was the most satisfying resolution for that. David?
No, I agree that what stage 2 actually wasn't that exciting or revelatory, but I do have to give them credit. At least it was practical. So they're not like exploding the universe of the world into an even bigger conspiracy yet. It made sense why they were doing it. So in that sense, I was satisfied that they weren't trying to reinvent the wheel and give us like an earth-shattering revelation. But in and of itself, it wasn't an exciting reveal when they built it up so much over the course of the season.
Yeah, it's funny. When he spent so much time gone, Tyrell Wellick, part of me was thinking, wouldn't it be funny if he came back and he revealed that he was just sort of like in a little office somewhere, like doing spreadsheets on stage 2 or something. That's kind of what he was doing. He was just like in a little room doing paperwork or like whatever form of Microsoft Excel destroys, corporate buildings. So it just felt like, and I didn't even think about it so much until we're talking about it now. It's like, oh yeah, he was just kind of in hiding. It wasn't really, there was, in preparing stage 2, there was no, there's nothing else going on behind the scenes that couldn't have been explained in a sentence. So having him gone all season feels a little bit like the delay of the finding out that Elliot was in, where it's just like, okay, well, you could have told us that maybe 3 or 4 episodes sooner. So I do think, again, it goes back to our, when we talked about how, maybe if this episode had been cut down to maybe 8 or 10 episodes instead of, expanded to 12, it might have been a little bit more satisfying. But I do think what did work was once, we get Tyrell and we get Elliot in that room together and we bring Mr. Robot back, Christian Slater, that mental kind of dance that they're doing where Elliot is still trying to figure out what's real and what's not, and Tyrell, give him the benefit of the doubt, presume that he's real at this point, and he's kind of trying to game out Elliot also, who he really is sort of interacting with as if he is Mr. Robot, because that's who he planned this whole thing with. And that scene with Tyrell having Elliot at gunpoint, well, I mean, man, that was just one of those, okay, this is why Rami Malek has an Emmy kind of moments. What do you guys think of that once the whole revelation-y part of it was over? How it played out as a scene between those characters.
That scene really worked because, and I think, what I missed this season were some of those scenes. Martin Wallstrom and Rami Malek worked so well off of each other, and then to have this kind of almost this tango, this kind of scary waltz with the three of them, with Slater in there too, and particularly the way Mr. Robot kind of blips in and out at the end, as Elliot's laying there, was really, really strong, and they avoided making. It was nice to see crazy Tyrell back, just completely unhinged. That worked for me.
I guess if you shoot Elliot, I think the point of the scene is hopefully to show that Tyrell is real and that Elliot is not imagining him. But for me, that scene didn't accomplish that because Elliot has been, beaten or shot or even died before in his hallucinations. So I'm not sure if it was worth the trouble, really. More convincing was when Angela was actually talking on the phone to Tyrell. So that scene for me, I don't know if it worked totally because the other side of it, other than finding out whether Tyrell is there, is finding more about Tyrell, the character. But he's been gone for too long that I just don't really have any investment in him.
Yeah, I think the scene worked for me because we had seen in earlier episodes repeatedly shooting Elliot and it having no effect. So I thought that actually did give a kind of meaningful payoff to the scene that Elliot's actually wounded. He's not recovering from this one. I don't think there's any question that Tyrell is real. I hope that the 5 or 10% that Daniel's holding out does not come to fruition. And they kind of played with it in the scene a little bit, and I was afraid that they were going to go there. I was like, they can't go there, not again. So I'm glad they didn't. I was overall, I thought the scene was solid, and I thought, but to your point, Riley, I thought the really short tag scene with Angela was even more impactful, especially what Tyrell says to her on the phone that he loves Elliot, and I didn't, not that I didn't mean this, but I did what I had to do. I thought that was really emotionally impactful, where the earlier scene was kind of structurally or storytelling wise made sense, but didn't necessarily pay off emotionally.
I love how you're saying that, the 5 to 10%, you hope it doesn't come to fruition. You can't do that. I feel like this show has given us all post-traumatic twist disorder. We're just like, just give it to us straight. We do not need another one. Just give us straight character, straight story. Maybe another twist down the line, but don't layer them on top of each other, because then we just don't know where the ground is anymore, and it just becomes hard to invest dramatically and emotionally in a story that feels like, not only is the rug being pulled out from under you, but you're imagining the rug too. So it's it's really confusing. But about that that tag scene with Angela, that was one of those one of the very end, one of the very last episodes of the season, or the last scenes of the episode. It filled me with that combination of ooh and oh. Because it felt sort of like one of those, and again, it's setting up next season, certainly, but, as it played out in real time, it felt like, okay, I remember last week, White Rose was telling her, I want your belief, in the sense that I had the impression that White Rose didn't just want her to go along, she wanted her indoctrinated, basically, to basically, drink the Kool-Aid, be a part of it, want it as much as White Rose wanted it, whatever the larger end game is. But I don't know how I get from her in last week's episode to her at that moment where she's talking with Tyrell with this level of familiarity, like she's known him for a very long time, has been communicating with him for at least some significant period of time, that she's not surprised Elliot's been shot, that she is planning to be there when he wakes up. So this felt a little bit like another one of those random directions that Angela goes into this season, and I'm not sure that I'm getting a really consistent characterization there that I believe yet, because it just keeps veering wildly in each direction.
Yeah, the only thing, because I was initially my first reaction to that scene was I rolled my eyes. I mean, there was an eye roll that could have been seen from space. And I'm probably the most, like, I've given this show the benefit of the doubt throughout much of the season. And the only thing that I can think of is I kept thinking back to last week's episode, which is again why, and we can talk about this later, why I feel personally that they should have stuck with what they originally planned to do and air this as one episode. Because I had to really think back and remember that, oh yeah, when Angela was in the room with White Rose, White Rose had said she gave her 28 minutes of time, and we only saw barely maybe a third of that interaction. And White Rose doesn't veer from the schedule, so I'm wondering, something happened not just to lead Angela to the phone call with Tyrell, but also the scene with the lawyer last week. Something happened. Some information changed hands between White Rose and Angela, and that's the only thing that I can think of. And we all know how persuasive White Rose can be. So that's where I kind of think it's going. But yeah, that I'm a little mixed on that. They're going to have to sell me a little more on that one.
It'll probably be 7 episodes before we find out what happened, in those 28 minutes. Like in this finale, we actually did get like a number of answers to some questions that we had. Why was Romero shot, or like what happened? Like, did Darlene survive and Cisco die? And I don't know, how much does Dom know? Who's sending Joanna the packages? Like they hit a lot of points, but like to Daniel's point about how kind of we get these twists and then that kind of colors our expectations. I feel like they've given us the most mundane answers for the mysteries that they've teased the longest. Like ultimately with Joanna, her packages are not related to the main plot at all. It's just some kind of this guy from last season who's kind of vengeful, or like, why was Elliot in prison? And then, people theorize, well, we did see him steal that dog that one time, and that's the answer. Or where was Tyrell? He was hiding. So I feel like the pacing on the show is all over the place, and just kind of weird withholding of information that fuels kind of episodes, but not really move the plot along at all. I think this season should have been like 6 episodes, standard length, because ultimately I don't think it told a satisfying story in and of itself. I think it just kind of teased future events.
Yeah, and let's talk about that, because let's talk about the scene between Lady McWellick and Scott Knowles, Brian Stokes Mitchell.
Excuse me, sorry, that's her name.
Yeah, Lady McWellick, Joanna. That scene was was both real, I thought, really effective, but also kind of confusing to me. Not because of what happened in that confrontation, that brutal scene, and those of us that know Brian Stokes Mitchell as Mr. Musical Comedy might not look at him the same way again after that. But the question that I had after it was, she has that scene with her boy toy guy, where she basically gets him to she manipulates him into basically incriminating Scott Knowles for the murder of his own wife to protect Tyrell. Did you guys take that as Joanna, that was her plan going over there all along, or was that just, oh, he beat the crap out of me, how can I use this?
Yeah, I thought it was planned. I thought it was planned all season, actually, which is, to Riley's point, a semi-mundane answer to a gigantic mystery, which is, it's a really long con to date the bartender from the evil court party so that in 12 episodes' time, you could, you can instigate a fight with Scott Knowles, have him attack her, and then have her use that to manipulate this bartender who she's been getting to fall in love with her to do the thing that she wanted him to do the whole time. I feel like she is such a really good manipulator that there has to have been a way for her to get this done simpler because it really doesn't seem like it really needed the kind of, labyrinthine, planning and plotting that she went into to do it. And I'm not sure if it clarifies, I'm having trouble figuring out if it clarifies why she killed that one guy who they were paying off at some point.
That's what I was gonna ask, because I still don't understand that.
Unless maybe he was, I don't know, some sort of witness who saw Tyrell actually do it or something and needed to get him. I don't know. It's kind of that's still very much a hanging mystery there. I don't know where we're going to get resolved. But one thing that's interesting about that scene, her and Scott Knowles, Brian Stokes Mitchell in particular, is what's interesting about this show and Sam Esmail as a writer and a director is that I have certainly issues with a lot of the larger story arc execution, but when he gets into a scene, he can write and direct the hell out of it. That scene, Brian Stokes Mitchell's performance in that scene, the writing between those two characters was so good that if I could just separate that and take that alone as like a little 2-act play and separate it from some of the inconsistencies and the larger story issues, so good. Did you guys like the scene in general as it played out, as separate from the larger plot issues?
Yeah, it served a lot of purposes. To Riley's point, it gave us a lot of information that we were waiting a long time to hear. But just in terms of the emotional roller coaster too, Brian Stokes Mitchell gave a fantastic performance, and just the way that the power changes hands between those two characters in the course of what was maybe like a 5-minute scene. And even as Joanna's laying on the ground after she's been beaten, you can kind of see on her face that she had kind of won the exchange, even though she's laying there, battered. She gives the impression that this is what she wanted, and she still has the upper hand. And it's just a great performances from the two of them.
Yeah, Stephanie Corneliuson, I on one hand, I kind of want to see more of her, but on the other hand, she's such a loathsome character that a little bit of her goes a long way. I mean, when she's basically just excoriating, him and his wife, and it's your baby's better off that it's dead. I was like, ooh, I kind of wanted to go after her at that point. So, I just want to see these pieces, and Daniel's exactly right. These individual scenes work really well in and of themselves, but I want to see them fit together more cleanly and more cohesively, so that again, that forward momentum that was such a hallmark of the show during the first season comes back.
I think my one pitch for next season is for Joanna to divorce Tyrell and then, through some twist, become Lady McPrice, because I kind of want to see them in scenes together. It feels like they mesh so much better in terms of their deviousness, because Tyrell always seemed like, even as he's been, masterminding or, working on the stage 2 of this whole plot, he's always seemed less cunning and less cool-headed and less capable than she is. And so I feel like, she could drop him to the curb and go like, you know what, you're a waste of my time. Let me find a bigger fish. And so yes, I'm just pitching that for season 3 for whoever's watching. Rated Price, season 3. And give us more Michael Christopher, because he wasn't in this episode, which I sorely missed. So that would work for me. But I think the episode was sort of broken into thirds. You had the Elliot and Tyrell scenes, you had the Joanna Wellick scenes, and then you had Agent DePiro and who turned out to be Darlene in the interrogation room. We found out that Cisco did in fact get killed in that shootout. We also found out that Darlene called him the love of her life potentially, which I don't know that I bought that on an emotional level, but again, another instance of two characters in a scene together, Sam Esmail cranking it up and writing those two beautifully. And I really do think the revelation of the season has been Carly Chaikin as Darlene. I think almost more than any other actor on the show is the one I want to see nominated for an Emmy next year. What did you guys think of that that part of the storyline, that interrogation between the two of them?
David,
you forgot to mention
Riley, go.
The most important part of the scene, or the most memorable for me, which is where that assistant director of the FBI goes on his Meta USA rant, where he says, like, this isn't a TV show, this isn't Burn Notice. And then first of all, I thought, okay, that's kind of a dated and reference, Burn Notice isn't on anymore. And then he says, there are no blue skies out there for you. And he says, characters like you are not welcome here. Like, it just kept going and going, so that was fun to watch. Carly Chaikin, though, yeah, this is definitely a great season for her. I think she'll have trouble at the Emmys, but at the Critics' Choice Awards, I am fully expecting a nomination, especially since she's a previous nominee for Suburgatory with them.
Yeah, I think she just is an absolute revelation this season, and the way she was able to, even in this episode, where this episode was really more kind of reactive for her. I mean, Grace Gummer, who was again spectacular. Carly Chaikin was more reactive, but you could see, underneath the defiance and the insults and all of the, the hard shell she was putting up, that she was really kind of just taken aback by the whole thing. That she showed that vulnerability. I think the question that I have from that is how much I believe what Dom is saying. There was a part of me that was watching that, particularly when she was talking about she was talking about the Python. I thought the Python monologue was really, really well written. The whole thing about just sitting back and watching and waiting for the moment to strike, and that it was the death that everybody thought was Dark Army, that it turned out to just be a random stray bullet. Did that strike everybody as, possibly her just baiting Darlene, or was that probably real? Or am I the only one that is now so suspicious of everything I see in the show that I'm questioning everything?
I think it could have been, but it seems like a lot of trouble for them to, get back into that next season.
I would believe that she was just putting on Darlene to get her to confess something, to get her to show her hand a little bit more. But when she goes into that room with Darlene, which was the music in that scene was a cover of Man's "The Moth," which I loved. And she takes her into that room. They see all the flow charts of all the people plotting with everyone else, and they have put surprisingly a lot of it together in the right way. Except they have Wellick here and Elliot there when it should be probably like that. That's probably the only thing they've got wrong. And so that surprised me more than anything, was that they do seem to have put more of these pieces together than it seems like they were putting together this entire season. And I'm wondering why we didn't see that Dom was in fact as close as she has shown herself to be, when they do have every single connection in place, even if they don't know exactly what the picture is that it draws. So I do believe that, I believe that Python speech. I believe the stray bullet, which it could still be wrong, but I believe it well enough to accept it and move on to next season. But I really do think that that there was there is a closing in sort of with that. Which seems weird. I'm a little surprised that the FBI was getting that close, that accurately, without ever revealing to us through Dom that she was this close.
So where does that leave? What do we think that will leave Darlene for next season? is her arc next season going to be, her, somehow
Guantanamo.
Guantanamo. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where they take it. I mean, we know that there's story possibility with Angela and Tyrell and Elliot, but the one that confuses me is Angela, or is Darlene. How does she get out of this situation, or does she get out of this situation?
Well, my prediction is that next season, the first 6 or 7 episodes, Darlene will be in Guantanamo Bay, but then in the 6th episode, it will be revealed that she's actually at her mother's house.
Would anything surprise us?
I guess opinion that I didn't particularly like the interrogation scenes at all. I thought they lacked a lot of. They weren't bad, but they lacked the intensity that I expected from the final pairing of these two characters. And even the reveal that Dom brings Darlene into the room and they have everything so accurately mapped. I was expecting something so much more, especially with the build-up cinematically that they give us to that scene. I was kind of like waiting for the linchpin of that scene when she's looking at they're kind of zooming in on the faces. And the fact that everything kind of looked right was surprising, but ultimately kind of disappointing. The only thing that I will say to its credit that the season finale does is completely subvert where we probably and Darlene would end up at the end of this season. Like 2 episodes ago, Angela was just about to go turn herself in, and we could have seen these exact scenes with Angela where Darlene could have just as easily went back to the Dark Army and started working with them and been that character getting that call from Tyrell. So the fact that they kind of inverted their roles, I thought was really interesting and surprising.
It's kind of new territory for a show like this to tackle, where you have the anti-heroes and then you have some sort of government force tracking them, where maybe on Breaking Bad you see Hank closing in and it gets more suspenseful, or similarly on The Americans, where even if they like suddenly talk about like, oh, there's a couple, then the stakes feel much higher. Whereas this one, they're saying kind of surprise, Dom knew everything, and then now the story is going to progress from there.
It actually kind of ties into when Daniel and I were in LA a couple of days ago. We had an extensive conversation with Chris Beecham and a lot of the other contributors. We had a long about Columbo, and the funny thing,
which is now on my Netflix list.
Which is now, yes, because we all, Daniel hadn't watched that much of Columbo, and we basically just kind of pelted him with our Columbo knowledge. But to me, and I think that's why this worked for me, because it was kind of like the way that a Columbo episode is structured, where you actually, who the killer is, and the interesting part is knowing that we know everything, but the people on screen don't necessarily know everything. And it was interesting to see that Dom, this was kind of like a reverse Columbo. She knew she's closing in, and she knew more than we thought she did. And I like that it initially started off with that whole kind of ridiculous, meta stuff at the beginning, which I didn't actually care for that much. It was a little too not subtle for me. Not that the show ever does anything subtly. But what I loved about it was in these types of interrogation scenes, the go-to response is to ratchet up the tension and ratchet up the emotion and ratchet up the voices. Whereas this was so, precise and directed, and you feel like Dom knows exactly where she's going. And that worked really, really well. There was almost a kind of like like I have you here, stop playing games, but let's talk about how we're similar. There was a certain empathy from Dom that was really interesting. I just thought it was so unexpected the way it played out.
The episode ended with another big kind of revelation, although I'm not sure how much it explained because it left me with more questions than it answered, was the return of Trenton and Mobley, who are at this large electronics store where they apparently work as some kind of geek squad. I don't know if they're just personally.
It was a Fry's Electronics, wasn't it? I was like, yes, there's one right around the corner from my house. I was like, yes, Fry's.
You've been hiding them this whole time. You knew all along. But it was hard to tell. Are they, in some kind of structured witness protection? Did they sort of witness protect themselves to try and get off the grid? What are they exactly plotting while they're there that they're talking about? That wasn't entirely clear. And then Leon comes up to them, and it's like the last shot of the season. So that seems really sinister. Like if he works at Rose and he's in the army and maybe he's cleaning house. But I mean, are they going to bring back Trenton and Mobley for this long, extended, slow push-in shot, just to have Leon show up and kill them? I mean, that would be disappointing to me. I hope it's a little bit more than that. But still, especially given that that was a mystery and nothing got really answered by the end of it. To end the season with that scene, I'm not sure how I felt about that. What about you guys?
I'm not sure how I felt about it either. It just seemed a little too. I don't know. It just seemed too easy. I mean, obviously, unless Sam Esmail's really playing with us, I mean,
usually
Leon's, which he might be. Sam, tell us. Which of course he won't. I find it hard to believe that they would have those characters disappear just when they started to really get interesting, just to have them be killed, at the start of season 3. So I think, but at the same time, it's like, why all of a sudden now? So.
Yeah, when the credits came on at the start of the episode, I was surprised by two things, which was no BD Wong and then Joey Badass in the credits. And then he didn't show up in the entire episode, so I was like, okay, he must be in the post-credits scene, which he was. And then I expected him to just gun them down, just kind of tie up a loose end in the show. But that didn't happen, so I would expect them to come back into season 3 and maybe join up with the rest of the cast in the middle of the season.
Yeah, I think it sets up an interesting possibility that they're going to be working against Elliot and Tyrell's plan. Well, we don't know what Elliot's going to be doing, but let's say that he's going to work with Tyrell to finish the 5-9 attack. And if they're going to be working against it, that could be a really interesting dynamic because they know and they executed Elliot's original plan, but it also feels like in COG, and they have too many. Like, there's too many characters to track. There's too many plot developments and people on opposite sides. I feel like if they do bring them back in a significant way too early, it's just too much for the narrative to handle at one time.
I'm kind of hoping that what happens there, since we didn't see them die or not die or whatever happens immediately after that moment, they cut to black. Since we know that, there's a direct line, White Rose, Leon, maybe that's sort of, bringing them back into the fold instead of tying up a loose end. So suddenly recruit them, give them an opportunity to take part in the plan, sort of like White Rose was doing for Angela, presumably. Just saying, want you in instead of out, instead of taking you out. So I'm hoping for that, because I do like those two characters a lot. They really just started to finally get a little bit developed this year, and they're very interesting to have on this show. So I don't, and they're more or less sane, rational human beings, which is a nice entry point to have on a show like this, where you need some kind of grounding element. And Trenton especially has always felt like a very level-headed, down-to-earth human being. When she's in a scene, I feel like I can trust her point of view in a way that I can't trust Elliot's, obviously, or even Darlene's or Tyrell's or Lady McGuellick. These are all characters with these secret plans and secret feelings and perspectives, and she feels very, very She and Mobley feel very grounded in a way that I feel like this show needs. And they can't execute all the grounded people, or else it's just going to be up in the air and everyone's just going to be floating in the sky of their imaginations.
So at the end of this, now that we've come to the end of this season, we just had the Emmys 7 days ago, and we're a full year away. What do we think of the show's Emmy chances next year?
It'll be interesting because I would think under almost any circumstance, this is a show that, given the mixed reception, the sort of up and down, not quite, certainly not blockbuster ratings, airing this early in the season, this was a show I would expect to go down in nominations next year. But Game of Thrones is gone next year for the season. That's a lot of open spots, certainly one in drama series that could give Mr. Robot a buffer to stay in there. Downton Abbey is over. That's another buffer spot that someone has to come in and take it all of a sudden. You can't just lose it. So that's going to help. Rami Malek's win the Emmys makes me feel reasonably confident. If nothing else, he comes back. The four women gone from drama supporting actress. And it could be more than that, because if you think about, the Game of Thrones women are gone. Maggie Smith, Downton Abbey is over. The other two are far from guaranteed to get back in. That was Constance Zimmer in Unreal. That show had a widely controversial second season that not as many people loved as the season one. And Maura Tierney, who might not get back in either, because it was a kind of surprise she got in the first place for the affair, even though that was richly deserved, in my opinion. So we could see a Carly Chaikin get in there just because of, the door is way farther open than it used to be. So it'll be really hard to say. It's vulnerable for drama series. I think Rami gets back in. I would like to see a little bit of an expansion in creative arts, get in for cinematography, get in for production design, get in for these categories. I think these are the fields that, whatever the narrative issues with this season, those technical aspects are just top notch. Get in again for score, of course. So that's my feeling. It's vulnerable, but I think it's going to be good news for it that Game of Thrones isn't around.
I think kind of echoing what Daniel said. Once you get in at the end, after a couple of years, then you can kind of keep getting in. But if you're just a new show and you've only gotten in one time, and you haven't even really fully gotten in that one time, like with Christian Slater and various technical nominations, it's very easy for them to drop Mr. Robot. And just looking at the writers branch, kind of as a microcosm for the Emmys, where there are so many slots, you have not only Game of Thrones is gone, but also, you've got The Good Wife, you've got Downton Abbey, and then you have Unreal, which definitely isn't coming back. So normally I would think that Mr. Robot would get dropped just because of the decline in quality, because it aired so early, all these reasons, and because the writer's branch is so fickle, but and they have to fill that many slots.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, that it should be able to retain most of its nominations from the primetime ceremony. I don't know about writing, because I don't think there's one episode in the season that really stands out as a choice for writing, but I could see Esmail getting in for directing, because he directed the whole season. It's kind of a known element of the season, as he directed all the episodes. So I feel like it should at least retain what the number of the primetime Emmy nominations that it had. I'm not convinced that they can break in supporting actor, supporting actress, writing and directing, to kind of sweep all those categories.
I think there's a good shot that it gets in for if BD Wong can maybe get another Critics' Choice nomination. I think he can get in, which would be so fantastic that I'd probably do a cartwheel on camera. I think in terms of writing, the episode without Elliot, the episode that was primarily a showcase for Carly Chaikin, I thought that was the strongest episode of the season, and that's the one that I would nominate for writing. That one was not written by Sam Esmail. So I would also like to see it get in for directing, just, I mean, on a technical level for last week's episode alone. But you know, say whatever you want about the pacing of the show, which we all agree has not been consistent this season, and that it was less successful in some areas than others. But Esmail has an eye. He has certainly has an incredible cinematic lens that he shoots these shows through, and so I would love to see him get in for directing. He's apparently planning on directing. I was reading an interview with him this morning. He's apparently going to be directing all of the episodes next season as well.
The good news for him as a director, being the sole director of this season, he can only submit once for Best Directing Drama. So he'll have to pick one, and whichever one he picks will consolidate whatever support there is in the directing branch for Mr. Robot, which would be good news for him and for the show in that category. Especially that's another category that's going to have open slots. 2 Game of Thrones episodes out, Downton Abbey out.
Nick is not coming back in time.
So there's a lot of opportunity there. This is really, I mean, just talking about it now, this is a really exciting Emmy season to be in, because to have like this juggernaut, Game of Thrones has won 24 Emmys in 2 years. And to suddenly, it's just gone. You're taking a year off, but it's just all that is just wide open real estate. It's going to be a huge opportunity for them. I would honestly, if I were them, I would try and produce the next season of Mr. Robot to premiere at the start of June next year. To capitalize on that first wave of Emmy voting for nominations. Because this year I don't think they're going to be able to rely on, carrying on the word of mouth buzz throughout the year the way they did this past season. So I think they're definitely going to need to remind the Academy what they are, who they are, and what they do. So I would recommend that they aim for a June premiere of season 3. I think that would be a huge help.
I think for writing, it's going to come down to just if they submit one episode or if they submit a bunch. And we see it both ways. Like various shows only submit the pilot, and then the next year they kind of go crazy, and then other shows don't. So I don't know which way this show will go. But if they do submit a bunch of them, there's no way that anybody can tell one episode from the other based on the title. And then even if they can...
Especially the show.
Yeah. And even if they can, there's not really a consensus single episode that was like head and shoulders above the rest anyway.
Yeah.
Well, they've apparently Rami Malek said that he's already shot at least one scene for the new season, although Sam Esmail did say in a couple of interviews that he wanted there to be a longer break between season 2 and season 3. But as of right now, it's still slated for most likely July. So I think it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening as they start developing the season.
Rami Malek didn't happen to reveal whether that scene included like the epic return of Alf, did he? One question we didn't answer is, what does Alf have to do with it?
Well, you saw him. You should have asked him.
Oh, I should have. Oh, you're right. That's my missed opportunity. I should absolutely ask him. I should have taken his Emmy and like pointed it at his throat, tell me where Alf is. Next time.
So Rami, we know that Rami is aware of this. We know that we found out at the Emmys. I think he told Marcus that he is familiar with our chats. So Rami, tweet us at Gold Derby. Where's Alf?
Hashtag where's Alf?
Hashtag where's Alf?
Oh, I want that to trend so badly.
I wonder how many categories that Alf episode is going to be submitted in, because that's kind of a very showy episode in terms of its cinematography, and you could say it's directing. You could even say they might submit it in something like costume design, since it gives them more to work with than normal.
Or production design, because they can submit multiple episodes for production design.
It'd be funny. Can you submit like the ALF segment just as multi-camera picture editing or something?
Yeah.
That'll be great. Just that one.
Oh, Riley, get on that. That would be so awesome.
So any final thoughts from everyone? Things we pretty much, I feel like we've covered pretty much everything, but if there's anything else that you noticed in this episode of the season that you would like to give final parting words before we reconvene, hopefully this time next year.
What about the voice of Alexa, or Dom's computer system? Did that remind anyone else of Claire Underwood from House of Cards? It had like the same tone and pacing of speaking there.
It had about the same emotional impact. Now, Daniel and I were talking about that. We're like, shall we have one? Let's sync up our Alexas to do these recaps. But I think my remaining thoughts of the season are, bravo Michael Christopher, bravo B.D. Wong, Carly Chaikin, Grace Gummer, fantastic. And even though I wasn't as thrilled with how that storyline culminated, Craig Robinson as Ray was just phenomenal in several of those episodes. For next season, I want to see more Michael Christopher. I want to see, and I think maybe I'm alone on this, but I want, this was a very non-heavy Christian Slater season, particularly since he's the one who plays the character of Mr. Robot. So I'd kind of like to see a little bit more of him next season as well.
Does he get into the Emmys?
I would have, if it is, it would be, I think, because he's Christian Slater, but that wasn't enough to do this time. But this time he doesn't have Dinklage. I would have loved to see the ballot. I would love to see where he ended up. But then he'll probably lose to Ben Mendelsohn's shadow.
But I mean, that's actually the Ben Mendelsohn point is very clear. Like, we thought, okay, Ben Mendelsohn was pretty much a lead actor in the first season of Bloodline. Nominated, he had a good chance to win if people had watched the episodes, especially. He didn't. Then the next season, he didn't really have much to do. He got nominated again anyway, and he out of nowhere won, which was kind of almost felt like a makeup to a certain degree from the previous year. If Ben Mendelsohn could do that, Christian Slater could absolutely get nominated next year. A kind of year late, kind of, oh, we're sorry we missed you kind of nomination, which I think they kind of did that with More Tierney with The Affair this year. They didn't nominate anything else from The Affair, but this year they usually like More Tierney. They nominated her from ER. This year they're like, oh, More Tierney, even though she did have a substantial uptick in the content of her material. Sometimes they'll catch up with you.
I think Ben Mendelsohn wasn't a makeup, though. I think it was just that the ballots were counted differently, whereas only his number one votes were counted this time, so he wasn't brought down by people who had no awareness of him / Bloodline. We saw a number of people at the Emmys this year who won more for their roles instead of their specific years, be it Margot Martindale or Regina King or. I guess
I could go on for hours about the Ben Mendelsohn thing making no sense, but we'll save that for some other time.
Yeah, that was one of the, no matter what Emmy system is in place, that is not a win that I would ever predict or even ever predict again, because I don't know how you see that particular kind of thing coming. So that category is probably written by Sam Esmail. So with that said, I think that's a good place to end it. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you David, Riley, and Tony for joining me in these many weeks for Mr. Robot. And I hope we see you all here next year. I will never obviously see any of you again until then. So with that, have a good night, and we will see you next year.